second most. I am ill. I am sick, okay? But, regardless, let's talk about cell phones. So cell phones are one of those things that make me believe that this is a simulation, right? Like, there are a couple things that I don't fully understand. Like, I completely grasp the explanation that is given. I just don't know if I believe it to be true. Like, volcanoes is one of those things. And another one is not even just cell phones, really, but digital communication as a whole. Like, the fact that I'm recording this and somehow it makes it onto my phone, and then somehow that makes it onto the internet, whatever the hell that is, and then that somehow makes it to your phone. It does not make sense. Where is it actually stored? You know what I mean? When I load something to YouTube, I mean, I guess it's technically like is it stored on a server and then we're all accessing that server? But how the heck, like, in actuality, did this get to the server? Think about it. Through airwaves and frequencies, I don't understand. So today we're going to read about how do cell phones work, okay? Whew, here we go. Cell phones use wireless technology. Although they do the same job, landlines and cell phones work in completely different ways. This doesn't help. Landlines, because now I'm going to wonder how they both work. Landlines carry along electrical cables, cut out all the satellites, fiber optic cables, switching offices, and other razzmatazz, and landlines are not that much different to the toy phones you might have made out of a piece of string and a couple of baked bean cans. The words you... Can you please move? Sorry, my dog is being... The words you speak ultimately travel down a direct wired connection between two handsets. What's different about a cell phone is that it can send and receive calls without wired connections of any kind. How does it do that? By using electromagnetic radio waves to send and receive the sounds that would normally travel down wires. Whether you're sitting at home, walking down the street, driving a car, or riding in a train, you're bathing in a sea of electromagnetic waves, TV and radio programs, signals from radio-controlled cars, cordless phone calls, and even wireless doorbells. All these things work using electromagnetic energy, undulating patterns of electricity and magnetism, my God, that zip and zap invisibly through space at the speed of light, which is 186,000 miles per second. Cell phone networks are by far the fastest growing source of electromagnetic energy in the world around us. And then there's a picture of here from a cell phone from the early 2000s, this is Nokia. Back when, you know, the keyboard was just 9 numbers. Ooh, I have to sneeze. Okay, I'll try to hold it as long as possible. How cell phone calls travel. When you speak into a cell phone, a tiny microphone in the handset converts the up and down sounds of your voice into a corresponding up and down pattern of electrical signals. A microchip inside the phone turns these signals into strings of numbers. The numbers are packed up into a radio wave and beamed. Like, do you see how ridiculous this sounds? The numbers are packed up into a radio wave and beamed out from the phone's antenna. In some countries, the antenna is called an aerial. The radio wave races through the air at the speed of light until it reaches the nearest cell phone mast. The mast receives the signals and passes them on to its base station, which effectively coordinates what happens inside each local part of the cell phone network, which is called a cell. From the base station, the calls are routed onward to their destination. Calls made from a cell phone to another cell phone on the same network travel to their destination by being routed to the base station nearest to the destination phone, and finally to that phone itself. Calls made to a cell phone on a different network or a landline follow a more lengthy path. They may have to be routed into the main telephone network before they can reach their ultimate destination. How cell phone masts help. At first glance, cell phones seem a lot like two-way radios and walkie-talkies, where each person has a radio containing both a sender and a receiver that bounces messages back and forth directly, like tennis players returning a ball. The problem with radios like this is that you can only use so many of them in a certain area before the signals from one pair of callers start interfering with those from other pairs of callers. That's why cell phones are much more sophisticated and work in a completely different way. A cell phone handset contains a radio transmitter for sending radio signals onward from the phone and a radio receiver for receiving incoming calls from other phones. The radio transmitter and receiver are not very high powered, which means cell phones cannot send signals very far. That's not a flaw, it's a deliberate feature of their design. All a cell phone has to do is communicate with its local mast and base station. What the base station has to do is pick up faint signals from many cell phones and route them onward to their destination, which is why the masts are huge. High-powered antennas, often mounted on a hill or tall building. If we didn't have masts, we need cell phones with enormous antennas and giant power supplies, and they'd be too cumbersome to be mobile. A cell phone automatically communicates with the nearest cell, the one with the strongest signal, and uses as little power to do so as it possibly can, which makes its battery last as long as possible and reduces the likelihood of it interfering with other phones nearby. Ooh, okay, that's kind of tea. That's exciting. I'm starting to grasp. The next section is what cells do. So why bother with cells? Why don't cell phones simply talk to one another directly? Suppose several phones in your area all want to use their cell phones at the same time. Oops, let me restart that. Suppose several people in your area all want to use their cell phones at the same time. If their phones all send and receive calls in the same way, using the same kind of radio waves, the signals would interfere and scramble together, and it would be impossible to tell one call from another. One way to get around this is to use different radio waves for different calls. If each phone call uses a slightly different frequency, the number of up and down undulations in a radio wave in 1 second, the calls are easy to keep separate. They can travel through the air like different radio stations that use different wave bands. That's fine if there are only a few people calling at once, but suppose you're in the middle of a big city and millions of people are calling all at once. Then you need just as many millions of separate frequencies, more than are usually available. The solution is to divide the city up into smaller areas, with each one served by its own masts and base station. These areas are what we call cells, and they look like a patchwork of invisible hexagons. Each cell has its base station and mast, and all the calls made or received inside that cell are routed through them. Cells enable the system to handle many more calls at once because each cell uses the same set of frequencies as its neighboring cells. The more cells, the greater the number of calls that can be made at once. This is why urban areas have many more cells than rural areas, and why the cells in urban areas are much smaller. Okay, that makes sense. And this is a picture that shows how cell phones handle calls. So it's a simple call. If a phone in cell A calls a phone in cell B, the call doesn't pass directly between the phones, but from the first phone to mast A and its base station, then to mast B and its base station, and then to the second phone. Okay, unfortunately for y'all can't see it, but I can. Roaming calls. Cell phones that are moving between cells when people are walking along or driving are regularly sending signals to and from nearby masts so that at any given time, the cell phone network always knows which mast is closest to which phone. If a car is making a call and the car drives between cells C, D, and E, and the phone call is automatically handed off, passed from one cell to another cell so that the call is not interrupted. The key to understanding cells is to realize that cell phones and masts they communicate with are designed to send radio waves only over a limited range. That effectively defines the size of the cells. It's also worth pointing out that this picture is a simplification. It's more accurate to say that the masts sit at the intersections of the cells, but it's a little easier to understand things as this person, have shown them. Types of cell phones. The first mobile phone used analog technology. This is pretty much how baked bean can telephones work too. When you talk on a baked bean can phone, your voice makes the string vibrate up and down so fast that you can see it. The vibrations go up and down like your voice. In other words, they are analog. They are an analogy of your voice, and that's why we call this analog technology. Some landlines still work in this way today. Most cell phones use digital technology. They turn the sounds of your voice into a pattern of numbers and then beam them through the air. Using digital technology has many advantages. It means cell phones can be used to send and receive computerized data. That's why most cell phones can now send and receive text messages, web pages, MP3 music files, and digital photos. Digital technology means cell phone calls can be encrypted, scrambled using a mathematical code before they leave the sender's phone so that eavesdroppers cannot intercept them. This was a big problem with early analog phones, which anyone could intercept with a miniature radio receiver called a scanner. That makes digital cell phones much more secure. And then there is it goes on about the history of cell phones, which is actually pretty interesting, and something that we could talk about in a separate video if you would like. But hopefully that either definitely like clarifies some things for you, or it's made it even more confusing. For me, it's a little bit both. Like, it's clarified some things, but it's also it's given me more questions. Like, are the cells and the masts for like who does YouTube use? You know what I mean? Like, are they in the Verizon network, or is this a completely different situation? Or they're like Google masts in cells and stuff. Like, now I need to know more. This has opened up a new can of worms, but have no fear because I am on the case. Okay. I'm trying to decide if I want to read this now or save it for another video. But my Postmates is almost here, I believe, girls. So y'all are gonna have to wait. Thank you so much for all of the support. Like I said, 31 subscribers is wild to me. Did I say? Hopefully I said 51. My brain is she's on break right now. She's on vacation for multiple reasons, alright? But yeah, so if you were wondering how cell phones work, hopefully now you have a better idea. And we could really get into the nitty-gritty one day, but that day is not today.